Imagine you're the CEO of a retail giant and tariffs have just slapped a 10% increase in costs across everything you sell. Do you pass it along to your customers, potentially facing a backlash, or do you absorb it and bleed your profits dry? Today, we're diving into the surprising decisions many companies made and the market's irrationally exuberant response.
If you think about the stock market as a person, which a lot of people who work in the stock market often talk about Mr. Market,
Okay.
that's there. Like it's an individual because it does feel like so many times the stock market has a personality. And unfortunately, again, I'm going to apologize to anybody out there who has mental health problems. Most of the time, it's described as manic depressive.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I
and
get it.
we're in one of those manic periods right now, which means there's no bad news. There's nothing that the market can come out with that it's not going to consider good news. So
Okay.
let me give you an example with what's happening right now. We've gotten CPI data coming out both for
Consumer
April,
Price Index for anybody who doesn't know.
inflation data coming out that's there. It was expected to go up because, of course, on April 2nd, Trump announced the Liberation Day. Everybody had these new taxes. And this new taxes on a significant volume of the stuff that you and I purchase. If companies have to bring that 10% additional tax in, it's not changing the price that they're paying to their original suppliers or anything like this. This is just an additional 10% on the cost. They have two choices. Number one, pass it along, right, to us consumers. When that happens, prices go up. CPI or inflation will go up because we are charging more for the same goods, right?
Right.
Bad news for the stock market.
Right.
Where we see higher inflation because people will buy less items, will feel a little bit more of a pinch. The other option is to eat the cost. Okay.
Right.
When you eat the cost, that is suggesting that you are going to make less profit on every item you sell. You're still going to sell the same volume. There's nothing to suggest that you're going to sell more, right? But you're going to sell the same volume for less profit. That's going to hit your bottom line. That should theoretically hurt your stock price, right? So
Right. Yeah.
either method in a tariff, which is just a unilateral imposition of an additional tax, should hurt your stock price.
But it's not doing that.
No, it's doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's doing the exact opposite, which is just ridiculous, which is that we have gotten our inflation data out there. It is lighter than expected, suggesting that most companies right now are choosing option B. They're choosing to eat that 10% extra cost.
So inflation data came out and you said stock prices soared. Okay, what if, yes, I recognize that companies are eating the eating the tariffs. And for the consumer, that's good, keeps costs low. But maybe they're responding to inflation is lower than expected, therefore interest rates won't be raised. And so the cost to borrow money as a corporation remains low.
That's exactly what they're suggesting. So actually, it's not even that the interest rates won't raise. It's actually that this is another sign that they could be cut.
So how does this, which one is more important?
Either way, it's bad news. To be honest, there's nothing about tariffs that are bad, that aren't bad news for the stock prices. However, right now, it doesn't seem to matter which way they pick. It was going to be good news. It's good news that it's not as bad as we expected. And if you look at the level of the S&P 500, we are higher than we were before we imposed these tariffs. And that's ridiculous. And that is crazy. And what we're seeing is that right now, it doesn't matter what happens. The market's saying, woohoo, let's rally.
So two questions. The first one is, if I am the CEO of a business, I'm a business leader, I know my price is overinflated. I know my stock price is overinflated. So that means eventually it'll go down. What kind of decisions am I faced with? Obviously I'm not going to do a stock buyback while my stock is overinflated. But what else may I be worried about?
So I understand that you are going to have some issues associated with it. A couple of things to talk about: compensation, right? So we're not I'm going to be issuing my shares to my employees for their compensation. Luckily, we've gotten away from stock options. A lot of companies no longer offer options. They offer RSUs, so you get the entire share rather than having to buy above a certain price. If back maybe 10, 15 years ago when stock options were more common, you would worry about that because then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to give everybody these options and they're going to be worthless.
But the same thing, you're giving, so if you decide you're going to give X, you never decide you're giving X number of shares. You decide you're giving X number of dollars. If we're going to give out $1 million in stock, we know that that $1 million is not going to be worth $1 million. It's going to be worth way less than that. So
Yeah.
we're basically handing our employees a falling price, and they won't even be able to sell it until we know the price has fallen because most of them have vesting schedules.
Yeah, well, hopefully those vesting schedules, and most of the time they are multi-year. So hopefully the market
Come
will
back up.
Yep,
Right.
and come back up, right? So that part isn't terribly concerning. That's there, but you do have to worry about that initial impact of the falling market, of the falling stock prices. That's going on. The other issue is you're actually going to have to recognize we're probably not going to be able to eat these tariffs in the long run. So right now, what the market is rallying on isn't likely to be what it's going to rally on in the long run. We're temporarily eating these tariffs because we're making the choice of we don't know what is going to happen, right? The stock price, they were all up and down, up and down. My son, I know it's a little kind of a side thing, but it actually tells me, I actually got an email from one of the suppliers of my son's clothes. He loves these trunks called slunks.
Okay.
They are beach volleyball shorts.
Okay.
And my son is a volleyball player, so he loves these slunks.
Okay.
And they are crazy pricey. I think they're $60 for a pair of shorts. But they had sent out earlier a notification that because of the tariffs, they were going to have to raise their prices by 145%. Because they guess where they're made in China.
Yeah.
They're made in China.
Okay.
Right? 145%. Obviously, that did not happen. It dropped to 30%. That's there. And they actually came out with an email that showed we have been eating these tariffs for the past 2 months as the tariff situation has been so uncertain. We can no longer afford to do that.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so we are imposing a 30% price increase, which is just tariffs. It's not us starting. And then they gave a date. I think it was like July 1st or something like that.
Interesting.
But it's there and it's starting to happen. And so what we are seeing light numbers come out of the CPI in April and May. I have a feeling that that's actually, we're seeing the financial consequences of most companies going, we don't know where these are going to be. So we're going to eat them temporarily, find out what the lay of the land is. So they've been preaching caution, basically. They don't want to piss off their consumers. I mean, every time that we've seen somebody announce a change in pricing, Walmart, for instance,
huge backlash.
Amazon. Yeah.
Right.
So I think we're seeing the financial results of these tariffs starting to be reality. And we are right now in the second quarter, right? So we got April, May, and June, April, May, and June for second quarter. Starting in July, we're going to start getting these announcements coming out. Right now, we're in mid-June, and we're seeing the market rally. I think you're going to start kind of seeing it level off and even maybe drop because the announcements that are coming out of second quarter earnings aren't going to be good.
Right. So along the lines of like what decisions leaders should be making, the example you made, they're called slunks. Is that right?
Slunks. Yep.
Okay. That example, full transparency to the consumer. I just want to say that is so important. So the fact that, if Walmart were to make a second statement, or if we were to armchair quarterback the first statement, I still believe they had to make the statement because they were trying to, in my opinion, help spread awareness that this is real. There are real impacts. You can't just absorb these things forever. But just like the company did with slunks, I would be very transparent with the public. I would put out a news bulletin, or I would a press release that says, here is how much we have consumed. Here's how much we've absorbed for you. And I would even play them out. Here's what will happen to our company. Here's how many people we have to fire. Here's how many, to make this work if we were to continue doing that. My opinion is more transparency, and I know that there will be backlash on them from the government. I mean, I recognize that, but I think the more transparency that companies go to right now, the better off they'll be, because the consumer will understand if they just show their cards. And I know that's hard.
I
But
think there's also safety numbers, Cindy, right? So right now
mhm.
we've seen a couple of, if you imagine everybody standing in a line, we've had a few people step forward and say something. And the government has been able to basically swat them back pretty hard, pretty harsh, right? When we start getting everybody announcing in July, we're getting all of these financial results. And if those financial results are not good, and they're sitting there saying, hey, we're going to have to raise prices in the second half because we can't absorb this, and we see our stock price get hit because our margins went from X down to down 10% because I absorbed
Mhm.
the entire tariff. We're going to see some real issues, and so then you'll start possibly seeing that crowd. Once we see that crowd, I think you're going to see a rush that's coming out, which is why you've got people like Jamie Dimon coming out and saying, hey, it's okay right now, but please understand this is not good. And we are probably going to see a second half issue still. You've got
Interesting.
Bank of America saying 16 out of 16 metrics, the S&P is expensive. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, these are not supported by fundamentals. Emotion can get you only so far in the stock market. And there is emotion. There's just so much emotion when it comes to money. And we do suffer from groupthink and all of those other things that happen,
Mhm.
which makes the market not as efficient as what some theorists would hope.
Right.
But yeah, it's
In the
just a
end,
scary time. It's a scary time.
I agree. Emotion
For
can only
somebody who
take you
makes
so far.
most of their money in the market, I am not excited right now. I this
I get it.
this rally has caused me stress.
Okay, so I think it just to sum it up, irrational exuberance, I think we'll call it right now. I think we are in a moment of irrational exuberance when we see companies saying out loud that they are absorbing costs, which should make their stock prices go down. The consequence being that they believe that interest rates may stay the same or fall, which makes money cheaper to borrow, makes generally keeps the economy going. So we're getting diametrically opposed signals right now.
But the math is not hard. Like, I want
Yeah.
you to think, really, just to stop for a quick second and think about this math. Okay, I raised all of your costs by 10%, which is going to take 10 full percentage points out of your net margin,
Bottom
right?
line,
So if
yeah.
you were making 20%, you're only making 10 because it's going to flow all the way down, right?
Yes.
If, on the other hand, the interest rates get cut by a quarter of a percentage point, right, which is what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
If we get really crazy, a half a percentage point, that is not 10% of your profits. That is nowhere close to 10% of your profits, right? Gone.
Okay, so full transparency. What you're watching is literally just a conversation between Jamie and me. We were just having a good time talking about what's going on in the world, and we're recording it while we had this conversation. And we decided to turn it into a podcast episode. Now, this is the point in the episode where I said, Jamie, I don't understand how in the world can a reduction in interest rates offset an increase in cost because of tariffs? And she said, well, they can't really. And so I asked her to pull out a spreadsheet and show me. So here you go. Yeah, Jamie, show us the numbers.
So this is where it doesn't make a lot of sense with what is going on as far as a per company basis issue, right? So this is just a really simple income statement, right? We start with our revenue, let's say $1,000,
Mhm.
and we spend half of our money on our operating expenses, meaning the price of our product or something like that, our operating expenses of our employees, blah, blah, blah. Which gives us operating profit of 50%. Now, this is a ridiculously high number, to be honest, for most
Sure.
companies, but it doesn't matter with what's happening. Interest expense, and let's say I actually am a fairly levered company, and we need this to be there because most companies aren't this levered. We want to show somebody who's fairly levered because they are the most likely to benefit from an interest rate cut. So
Okay.
we're going to have $250 of our $500 of operating profit is going to go to interest expense, leaving us with pre-tax profit of $250.
Okay.
In the United States, the supposed corporate tax is 21% of profits. So multiply 21% times my pre-tax profit of $250. That's $52.50, giving me $197.50 or 19.75% profit margin.
Okay.
Okay, let's do the two impacts of the potential situations that we are talking about. The stock market is rallying up. Okay.
Okay.
The first one is going to be, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this. I'm putting a 5% interest rate because we're going to have to know what that is so that we can adjust with what's
Just the
happening.
interest rate. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, let's go ahead and absorb those costs.
Okay.
Okay. Let's absorb those costs. When I do that, that's suggesting 10% of my costs are going to go up by 10%, and I'm going to eat it.
Okay.
Right. So my $500 worth of expenses is going to go to 550. Okay.
Okay.
That is going to reduce my operating profit to 450.
Okay.
Okay. That does not change my interest expense at this point.
Right.
Okay. My interest expense stays the same, and I'm going to lose 250 of that, giving me pre-tax profit of $200, and I will pay less in taxes because I have less in profits,
Okay.
giving me a total net income of $158. In other words, my profit margin went from 19.75 down to 15.8. Right.
Okay, so
So
I just want to pause for a moment that one of the things that we did not talk about previously was the impact of when you implement a tariff, which is a tax, right?
yeah,
It has the net effect of decreasing the amount of taxes that our corporations pay into the government if they absorb the tariff itself. So just want to make sure that we cover that. Like everything that we talk about is so complicated and has so many different effects in the market. I just want to say that out loud. So we may be paying a tax over here in tariffs, but we end up also paying less tax to the federal government
yeah. And
if
so
we
now,
absorb that price. Yeah. So go ahead.
yeah. So if we think about this on the fact that if this happens, this is supposedly what most managers have chosen to do in anticipation that there is going to be an interest rate cut as a result, that is happening. And let's go ahead and go hog wild and say a 50 basis point interest rate cut. I think what they're actually doing is they're absorbing the cost of the tariffs right now because they don't know what the actual tariffs are going to be in the long run. So they were taking a cautionary approach, saying, okay, we'll absorb it temporarily because they're going to do this math and they're going to see the same thing and they're going to make a different decision. You're going to see here in just a second.
Got it.
So
Okay.
they temporarily are absorbing the tariff. And the benefit of doing that is that maybe we're going to see an interest rate cut here in June.
Okay.
Now, we're going to go ahead and be stupid crazy and do a full 50 basis point interest rate cut. That's not going to happen. The
That's
market is
0.5%,
praying for
right?
25%, but 25 basis points, not percent. 25 basis points, not it. So that's going to reduce my 5% interest rate, which if you can see at 250 divided by 0.05, I have $5,000 worth of debt. That's how you would get 5%
Okay.
on 5,000 is 250. If that gets reduced, and for some strange reason, I immediately see my cost of debt go down, which doesn't really happen
Yeah, I was
either.
going to say, aren't
This
these
is
negotiated interest rates? That's
yes.
why I'm like, this is why I was having such a difficult time with this because as a mortgage holder, I just assume all interest rates are fixed.
They're
Yep.
not. They're not. And there is a lot of variable debt in the market, but not a ton. But we're going to go ahead and
Okay.
just do everything that is completely, stupidly happy. This is the
Favorable to the
best
market.
scenario,
Yeah.
benefit to
Okay.
the market. And what you're going to see here is that's going to reduce my interest expense from 250 down to 225.
Got
That's
it.
it. My actual dollar amount benefit is going to show up as 225, and I go, still, it takes away some of the pain of,
But not all of the pain. Yeah.
but not all the pain. And I still see my net interest margin or my net interest or my net margin. Sorry, I'm a banking analyst. I always want to talk about interest. My net margin drop from 19.5% down to 17.8%. I see it hit me. It hurts. I see less profitability going forward if I absorb these tariffs. If I
And
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
If I don't absorb these tariffs, this is what's at risk instead.
Because consumers will spend less, is that correct?
Because, well, they'll actually spend probably about the same dollar amount, but it won't buy as many products, right?
Got it. So your
So
revenue will be less because more of that revenue is going to the tariffs
yeah,
essentially.
because think about that, right? So my operating expenses, even if I pass it through to my consumers, right? My operating expenses don't go down. It's just that my revenue is going to go up, but I'm going to sell less. So there's going to be some variable costs that
Got
may
it.
go down, but not all of those fixed costs, which probably means that my impact on my profit margin still ends up being negative. We're going into an economic cycle that suggests that profitability is going to be harder to come by, either because of higher pricing
Mhm.
or because of higher expenses, or a combination of the both. And there is no way that this one line right here can make up for it 100%,
Got it.
right? There's going to be a negative impact. And yet, if we go to the market, where are we compared to April 1st?
Higher, which
Uh,
makes
We
no
should
sense.
be
Yeah.
down. We
Yeah.
are up. It's just basic math. And here's the thing. If you're a manager, you know this math, and you know your math much better than this generic example that's there.
Mhm.
We threw everything positive that's going to happen in here,
Right.
and we still can't make up the difference.
Okay, so you're the manager who's deciding whether or not to raise prices. Tell me why this is not sustainable long term. I know it's not sustainable long term, but so tell me, uh, there's a lot of pressure on companies right now to just continue to absorb these costs. We know that it's decreasing their net income, it's decreasing their profits. Why will the market not allow corporations to sustain that?
Well, first of all, we got to think about the type of corporations that are actually facing this decision. It's not a company like this. The company that you're seeing here with a 50% operating margin, it's a tech company. It has to be,
Yeah,
because that's the only type of companies that make that type of profit. Let's instead go to what is likely being impacted by these tariffs, and that's going to be consumer goods, right?
right.
Which means you're going to Walmart and Costco and Best Buy and all of these other locations, these gigantic retailers whose numbers down here didn't start at 19.75%. They're starting at 3
Got
or
it.
2, or if you're lucky, 5. Now imagine what the impact is going to be. It's crazy, crazy high. You're
Okay,
going to lose most, if not all, of your income.
so again, and like I just want to, I'm just going to keep asking you why, because there is this strange belief, and I think it's because it's always David versus Goliath. We just always assume that corporations are out to get us, right? That is a widely held belief. I have a 20-year-old son. I guarantee that is his philosophy entirely. Why is that? So let's say Walmart only has now 1% profit
Okay.
instead of 3%. Why is that not sustainable long term?
Oh, it is. I mean, it's not like the Walmart's going to go down or go under. It's not like we're going to see Walmart go bankrupt over these 10% tariffs. They won't let that happen.
What are the
Um,
consequences, though?
well, first of all, permanently
Uh,
lower stock price.
exactly. So I am a shareholder. When I buy your stock, I am loaning you money.
Yes.
So if I bought at 75, and I have no idea what Walmart's stock price is, if I bought at 75 and now it's $50, I am losing money.
Yeah.
I am livid.
Yes. I
So
absolutely agree with you. And it's worse than that, because Walmart actually, I don't think, I'm going to do the math right now here. I don't think it can absorb a 10% increase in its costs without it going to the negatives.
Jamie, we've been talking about like long-term consequences of everything that's happening right now. And the question is, can corporations sustain absorbing these costs, these tariffs? And so I think you just did some quick math.
I did. I just did some quick math, and the answer is absolutely not. And this is a really great example. So this is a bit of a simplified, but the accurate numbers of Walmart's 2025 results, meaning through January of 2025. So this is last year's numbers pre-tariffs, right? So
Okay.
this is everything that's happening before tariffs. And it's a bit of a more complicated income statement than before, but it actually gives us a little bit more of a direct understanding of why Walmart cannot absorb these costs that are going there. So tell me, when you go to Walmart, where are your products manufactured?
I have no idea. I assume that they're manufactured in China because they're all about low prices, and as I understand it, they have the lowest manufacturing costs, right? So I would assume China.
So they're all over the world, is what I'm going to
Okay.
say. There is made in the USA still. There is, so not everything that's sold at Walmart is going to be subject to tariffs. But there's a lot that are coming in from other countries, and there is still a substantial amount that is coming in from China, which is facing 30% additional tariffs, not
Mhm.
10% additional tariffs, right? So if we just make an assumption that overall we're going to the zero tariff USA based stuff is going to be offset by the 30% tariffs on the China made stuff. And we say overall, the cost of the products are going to go up by 10%.
Mhm.
Okay, we can actually look and see that impact that's here. So for those of you who are not income statement people, let's just go over. There's two different types of revenue at Walmart. It's the net sales. That's all the stuff we buy, and then after we return it, here's everything they actually sold. 642 billion with a B dollars worth of revenue last year. In addition, we had another 5.5 billion dollars of membership fees at Sam's Club.
Sam's Club.
Okay. Yeah, that's Sam's Club. That's there. So a total of $648 billion of revenue in 2025's fiscal year. Cost of sales, that is the cost of the products that they are selling. Okay. This does not include operating costs. This is not HR. This is not headquarters. This is not advertising. This is the cost of operating. This is the part that's going to get the 10% hit.
Does this
That's
also
there.
include the real estate for the stores, or is this just the cost of the goods?
Cost of sales is everything that it costs for Walmart to get your product onto the shelf and sold. So it
Got it.
does include some costs associated with the operating businesses, et cetera. So we can even be generous if we want. I went ahead and applied a 10%, but we could do an 8 or a 9, suggesting that some of that is not tariff related items.
Sure.
That's there. But it doesn't really matter if I do that or not, because I want you to look at this. 76% of the cost that Walmart has, 76% of their revenue comes out from their cost of sales, their product that's there. They have a very thin margin. Another 20% goes to selling, general, and administrative expenses. That's the cost of everything that can't be allocated directly to a product. So things like your HR functions, your advertising functions, everything that's behind Walmart, the cost of the warehouses, et cetera. That's
Got it.
there. Okay, so that's 20%, meaning that before they've paid taxes, before they've paid interest, right now, for every dollar you spend at Walmart, Walmart is making 4.2 cents. That's it, 4.2 cents for every dollar you spend.
Wow.
Okay, let's go ahead and knock that cost of sales up by 10%.
Okay.
Okay, when you do that, and you can see my numbers are a little bit off over here, but here we go.
There we go.
The cost of sales jumps to 83%, and my operating income drops to negative 3.4%. In other words, I lose money.
Got it.
Walmart cannot lose money in the long run. It
Right.
won't do that, right? They can't absorb a full 10% price increase that's there. If they perform an 8%, they can't absorb it. If they perform a 6%, they can't afford it. They still aren't
Wow.
profitable. That's there. So they cannot absorb this kind of overall universal 10% price increase.
Got it.
It's not possible. They have to pass it through to their consumers. They have to, at least in some marginal areas, pass on that price increase.
Got it. And the consequence, so let's just say, for example, that they absorb some of it, let's say they absorb some of it and they get to zero profit, right? So we're not paying you to buy our products anymore, but we're essentially at zero profit, that is when we start to affect the teachers' pension fund. This is where we start to get into affecting the stock price, which is not just about making wealthy people wealthier. This is actually about people being able to retire and from their jobs and that kind of thing, which I
And
think is really important to understand.
corporations aren't going to deal with this, right? They're not
Right.
going to not be profitable over these 10% tariffs, which means they are going to cut. And it may be that they increase the prices on us so that they can, pay their employees, but they could also be doing things, and that's likely happening, which is let's find some cost efficiencies. Cost efficiencies in the United States tend to be human capital, meaning
Exactly.
we're going to cut people, we're going to cut
Right.
associates, we're going to hurt people's jobs. That is what can happen when we're talking about these. And the weird part is this math is so super simple. Everybody knows how to do this in the market. Everybody knows how to do this at Walmart, who's in their finance department. Everybody knows this has to happen, which is why Walmart came out and actually tried to be like, okay, look, we are going to have to do some price increases. How
Right.
much they choose to absorb compared to how much they pass along is still up in the air. We don't have a defined dollar amount. We're never going to, right? It would be
Right.
hindsight that's going to happen. It's going to lots of other things are going to move in there to make it impossible to just isolate. But the result is, why is the market rallying? I don't understand. This math is done 1,000 times in every country, every company that we are talking about. Why
Right.
are we rallying? There is no way once you're negative here, it doesn't matter how small you get your interest expense.
Right.
It's still gonna
It's still
do
negative.
more subtraction,
Right.
right? So even if that gets cut in half,
Right.
it's still gonna be more subtraction.
Yes. So we do know that the market is irrationally exuberant right now. It sounds like there's not a lot, just from a decision-making perspective, all of the decisions are in how much of the cost to push to the consumer versus eating as an organization. Do you lay off people so that you don't have to excuse me, uh, do you lay off people so that you don't have to convey those costs to your customer? And I think in the long run, no matter what happens, we are going to see a correction in the market. And there's not a lot that the leaders of organizations can do about that. They just need to
Nope.
hunker down and stay in it for the long term.
There we go.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
So, where does this leave our business leaders? They're stuck between two impossible choices: absorb the tariffs and risk profitability and potentially layoffs, or pass the tariffs along to the consumer and risk losing market share. But one thing is clear: the math does not lie. The market might be riding high on optimism now, but a reckoning is coming. And when it does, the companies who have thought strategically and communicated transparently will weather the storm best. Until next time, think long term, because short term optimism has an expiration date. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us what decisions leaders are making that you want to learn about.